wants to go out. I mean, no one wants to go out and win every single race. I mean, they really don't. I mean, sure, it'd be great to go win it. We're out and win every single race. Great. But you don't want to do that over and over again. You're gonna get bored. Everyone wants to have what we just had. I mean, we just had some great competition, and so we just now need to make sure everyone here gets like up by the third event. That everyone here is like they can win a race or they can be, close. And this is how it happens right now.
So one of our first lessons in sailing school is what is a sail? Megan Bartley, what is a sail?
It's basically a wing.
It's a wing.
It's a wing.
It's a wing. One of our first lessons in sailing school. Every sailing instructor says your sail is a wing. What does the advantage of an airplane have? Shroff.
It has lifting services.
No, an airplane has an engine.
Oh, well, yeah.
An airplane has an engine. Right? An airplane, I didn't say glider, an airplane has an engine. So an airplane has either a propeller or a jet engine. So its wing always has flow, no matter what, because it has an engine. Okay, so think about that, right? An airplane gets too slow, it needs to generate more power, more lift, just step on the gas. Just like your car at a red light or a stop sign. A jet plane gets too slow, wants to generate more lift or go vertical, just throw on the thruster. All right? We can't do that because we don't have engines. Our wings, though, operate exactly like an airplane wing. They generate a low pressure and a high pressure, so they generate lift. So our advantage to generating more power is to what? How do we generate more power in our sails? What do we want to do? Think about physics. If I have this force coming from, I'm going to use my right hand, so your all's left, and I have this force coming from your all's right, my left. What do we want to do to generate more power? If we have this head-on collision, this is 5 miles an hour, this is 5 miles an hour, what do we know what happens here? It's a 10-mile-an-hour collision, basic physics, right? When we're in middle school. If we're going this way, this is 5 miles an hour, this is 3 miles an hour, this is only a 2-mile-an-hour collision. So upwind, your advantage is to increase your boat speed. Because if you increase your boat speed into the wind, you are increasing your power. All right, so one of the things about the Vanguard 15 is you want to sail the boat flat. Because if all of you can look at the boats when they're out of the water before you launch next week, they're flat transoms, they go in, and then they wind up with a very, very skinny bow. There's no hull stability. So you want to sail the boat flat, meaning that you pull on your sail plan up vertical, but the other thing, as you pull your sail plan up vertical, you push your centerboard and rudder down vertical. So you have less side slippage and the most amount of power. And then where I'm going with this is this picture here of Bridget and Jack is today was all about power. And the only time you should have depowered, and I was even harping on Bridget and Jack about this, and Mike already left with his crew Ray, is do Bridget and Jack still have the opportunity to generate more riding moment? Yes.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Their knees are bent, their hips are bent, they're up. Bridget's hair is still dry. Jack's hair is still dry. Look at their ankles. Their ankles are still bent. So my point to Bridget and Jack, and I was talking to Luke and Ray out there, is until you are hiking off your toenails, straight leg, flat out, hair wet, you don't want to ease the sails. Not in a, all right, but just visualize that, right? Until we are flat out, straight leg, hiking off our toenails, maximum riding moment, we then want to say ease. So that's what today was about, is who could put the most power in the boat off the starting line first, because then they're running into the vector of the wind coming down, and as they're increasing their boat speed, then they're getting the advantage of what? More power, because they're faster against the wind. So if they're going 4.1 against 5 knots, they have a 9.1. If you're going 4 against 5, you only have a 9.
Right.
So that is the thought you want to have, is what can I do as fast as possible, because I don't have an engine, that I generate as much power in my sail plan first before my competitor, that then as I go faster, generate more power. So what I want to change in your thinking is, we've had this adage before, ease, hike, trim. I'm sure we all heard that. I actually like to say it when the puff comes: ease, hike, go straight, then trim. Because what you want to do is, if you think about it, the puff comes, I ease so I don't tip over, I hike against it so I increase my riding moment, but now I go straight, meaning my boat speed just went faster, then I trim. So now I've generated more power. I have more apparent wind. That's like stepping on the gas on a car. That's like pulling on the throttle in an airplane, and you will be faster.
So remember, when he's talking about these things too, is your sails need to be set up. So it all goes back to that too, because if you ease and your vang is off, you ease because you're overpowered. Well, if you ease, you're overpowered, and your vang is off, what happens? Your boom goes up, and you get more power. So it's like opposite, right? So it's like, okay, well, I just powered up my sail by easing. So remember that you can't. This is exactly perfect. What he's talking about, but you got to have everything else set up first.
Right.
Set your sails up, set your vang up, have your control so you can use them. Because if you ease and your vang is not right, your main sheet is your vang and your main sheet. So what's happening is you're actually powering up instead of just easing. And so you got to look at, like, that's why the first part of this whole conversation was set your sails up right. Make sure you have all the tools so that when you go into this mode, which is where we all should be, it makes sense. Because otherwise you can see, Dave, I eased, then I hiked, and then I trimmed. But reality is, you eased, you powered your boat up more, you tipped over more, you hiked more, but then you're out of sequence. So that's important too.
That's why it's important to go straight.
Yeah.
So ease, hike, go straight, and then trim back on. The telltales today was a puff comes. If you want to think about a tactical, and this is where maybe this trimming will make sense. Today, the tactical situation was the puff comes off the shore, right from almost where our lawn tramp was. Our lawn tramp was almost in line with the mark set bot. The puff comes offshore, and the thought should have been, I know this puff came offshore, I can see it come offshore, and I don't see a puff behind that. So my tactical strategic thought process would have been, when that puff gets to my boat, what am I going to do as I'm looking upwind with that puff to get in position for the next puff?
Take a step up.
Maybe take a step up. So you're playing like an old-fashioned connect the dot. All right, that puff's coming from the light pole. Oh, but my next puff is coming all the way from the barn. I better make sure as that puff comes from the light pole, all right, for lack of a better expression, I'll use my right hand. I get on starboard tack now, and I'm using that puff that's coming from the light pole to aim at the puff that's coming from the barn. Then when I get to the puff that's coming from the barn, do I want to stay on starboard because now the next puff is coming from the red barn, or my next puff is coming from the light pole? If it's coming from the red barn, well, I'll still stay on starboard. If it's coming from the light pole, I'll tack back on port and head back towards the light pole.
So will you let that override shifts?
Yes, on inland lake sailing.
Yeah, the other thing you want to do,
fact-
you want to pay attention to timing. Like when you go out on a day when you go out on the lake, you'll just pay attention that, okay, a righty came, and just kind of either mentally or even look at a watch and say, okay, and then pay attention that, okay, 15 minutes later, same thing happened, or you know, whatever it is. There's you know, you look out there and you're like, oh, breeze side. Oh, here it is again. You know, so it's like you should have seen patterns, and actually it should have been a great day to really just like be shifting gears and doing things and doing better, like getting better, because there were a lot of things out there. You know, you had every scenario other than like nuking, which is really is good because you don't learn a lot in nuking other than you try to survive. And so you had a lot of fun because, you know, yeah, I even heard one of the guys, you know, tacked away and that righty was coming in and they just went, ah, you know, because they knew, you know, that they got it and no one else did. And so, you know, it's just cool that like someone who was a good sailor to begin with was excited because, you know, they called it right and then, you know, and they were there first. And in these boats, you know, if you get to it first, it's huge, right? Because you can plane before anyone else, upwind or downwind, and you're gone. You know, you're gone. Like that first race, the guys that won, I mean, they were gone. You know, and so it's just, but it's neat because you see that, but then they can get in the hole too. So it's just, you know, you pay attention to a lot of different things, and having like 7 boats, hopefully, I was like 9 to 10 next time. Like that's great because everyone can learn and do well because you don't have like 50 boats, and you know you can get good starts and you can learn and do better and spar and have, you know, productive sailing.
So John, to expand on your question, does that override the shift? The thing you have to remember about a shift is if this knot of wood there again is our weather mark, and these boards are equal ladder rungs. Okay? All the way down. The gain to the weather mark, or if we want to say the gain to the leeward mark, is when I get off this ladder rung, I want to get to this ladder rung first. And then when I get off and climb off this ladder rung, I want to get to this ladder rung first. And then when I climb off this ladder rung, I want to get to this ladder rung first. The thing we need to visualize here is these ladder rungs, all right, and hopefully you can see it with my notebook, rotate with the wind. Right? If my wind moves to the right, my ladder rung does this. Okay, here I am with my knot. If my wind moves up here, say to my left, my ladder rung does this. So, John, on your question, does that on inland lake sailing way out over the shift? I say yes on a day like today because it was so shifty. Is when it shifted left, my ladder rung does this. Odds are, I mean, depending on where you were in relation to the mark, it was going to shift back right. So what you want to do is with this left-hand shift, since my ladder rung is this, I'm lifted on my hand now's the boat, left shift, I'm lifting on port. It's okay. Do I want to take the full shift? Yes, I want to take small advantage of the lift, but I actually asked Bridget and Jack when I interviewed them on the land, Bridget and Jack, did you ease in the puffs? And they said yes. Why are they easing in the puffs? Because they were pretty confident that they were going well, that you think about it, left shift comes, the ladder rung shift, but they were so confident, oh, I'm not laying the mark, I'm going to ease because I know it's going to shift back right, so I'm sailing to the shift faster. And Bridget and Jack talked about, I asked them if that, and that's what they were doing today, so I hope
And
that
then
answers.
also, I would say, if there's anyone to the right of you, it's reducing their leverage when it shifts back the other way.
Correct, and that's why today was also a tough day when you want to talk about upwind tactics. And if next time we'll have to bring a whiteboard so that we can use
We're
them in
grabbing one
minute
right now for you.
Today's one of those things. How do I explain them?
Here comes your whiteboard.
Oh, here comes my whiteboard.
So real quick on that though, with what he was talking about too, is remember this is like he's talking about the Vanguard 15. So like on a Vanguard 15, you can reach, right? If you reach, you gain. And we race, you know, Sea Scouts and MCs here too, same thing. If you overstand the mark, it's no big deal, because what happens is you ease and you reach like faster. You know, if you're on a different boat, you reach and you go, you know, 0.1 faster. That's not winning, you know. So on a Vanguard 15, you can error a ley line because you can reach. You know, you just crack off and you're going a lot faster, like, you know, half a knot faster pretty quickly in these boats. So that's another thing to think about when you're doing this is, you know, that's going to happen too, is you're going to actually benefit to go straight, and that may even just like slingshot you again through that next shift as well.
Well, that's how we battled a few like that, where, you know, going just bow down and faster to the next shift. You know, you're wound up inside, you tack and lead, and just in these boats, my understanding at least, I mean, is that their bow down speed through the water boats as opposed to an FJ where it's like, you know, up and flat, you know. And anytime half the time in a big blasters, I had my shoulders below the water for Dave's feedback that, you know, maybe a little bit of a feather.
Yeah,
But
and
just
then
keep
the
it super flat.
one thing you also need to remember too is, like, you know, when you're lee bowing, it's hard, right? Because, you know, they're flatter boats, you're not rolling them as well, and so you got to remember, okay, where am I going to lee bow? And you got to lee bow so you can get out. But if you can lee bow so you can get out, and then you come back up. So it's different, you know. It's just, you know, you can't just come in right here and park it, you know, and go straight, because you can't. You got to come and turn, go down, and then come back up. And so it's a different game as well.
So, upwind, John, you asked. So, upwind, here we are. Red's winning, coming across on starboard, is crossing all four blacks. Two situations we have. Red's comfortably crossing the group, coming from the right-hand side. But she isn't laying. She can either tack low, right? She can continue her cross and tack in the middle, still be leading, or she could continue all the way across and tack here. So one of the things, inland lake sailing, when red's coming across, the most vulnerable position is to tack low and lead back out. That is the most vulnerable position. The most conservative is to say, crossing when I can, I'll cross all the way, tack up here, all right? The percentage move is to get in front of the most advanced boat and tack right in front. Yes, you lose some of your distance sailing in the shift, but knowing that it's going to, 9 times out of 10, shift back the other way, you're still leading in. If you tack here shy, leading back, and you think it's coming back right, before you tack back out, back on the starboard, you have to wait for the last boat to point bow down at you. So even though if you're coming across, you're like, oh, I'm going against the grain, I'm going against the grain, I'm going against the grain, I know that the shift is going the other way, you need to get yourself at least squared back up with the fleet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
So the opposite of that is you're not crossing the fleet,
Because you
then you need to go early. Because then you want to get to the next boat, that shift first.
It's
Even when
NASCAR
a
racing.
Vanguard, also do it earlier as well.
Right? It's NASCAR racing. You don't get extra points from Megan or Ed who scores it because you won by a half a leg. You get a 1 or a 2. You get a 4 or a 5. You don't get a benefit, right? So you have to think about, once I get up front, what do I do that once I get up front that I go elbows out and I'm now blocking? And sometimes that means, depending on where I am strategically, but if I think, oh wow, I got caught a little right, the majority of the fleet's on port, so they're thinking they got a little bit of a lefty. Does that make sense to everyone? The breeze is here because the majority of the fleet's on port, so they're thinking I got a little bit of a lefty, but I was leading coming out. I tack here, right? The lefty still continues. I'm in big trouble. I think it's going to go back right, I have to wait for the last boat all the way out there to start to show the shift before I can tack if I want to keep my same game. But if I say, all right, I'll eat a little crow here going against the grain, I at least want to get in front of the most advanced boat. I don't need to go all the way here, because if I go all the way here, I'm exposing myself to these boats down here.
The closer you are to the mark, the closer you actually kind of hammer them. Like, you know, you don't want to go out there and hammer people, because, especially in short course racing, because they're going to hammer you back. But
you could see a couple times in the top where places were changing, like Bridget and Jack today were definitely guilty of getting the shift and tacking right away on the shift. And then they would lose boats inside of them. And they're like, but I was on the lift attack. It's like, yeah, you were on the lift attack, but you didn't square yourself up to the boats behind to then take advantage of the lift. So why I want to show this picture is, so one thing is, I'm sure we've all seen air shows, and we've seen the cool little stunt planes go vertical, and right, you never see the Blue Angels fully do it and stall out, but we've seen the biplanes go vertical, and they go vertical, 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 and then they stop, and they just fall out of the sky like a rock. And until they get propeller turned back towards Earth and generate flow again, they would fall like a rock. So this picture here, and we're going to find a way with Megan and whoever that we can look at some more pictures, and maybe we can start a chat room, is this is why I want to talk a little bit about the airplane wing. Is we are all strong enough that we can shut our airplane wing down. So you have to be disciplined, is if this is my rudder, there's my mast, and the boat has a little bit of heel in relation to the water, then I would argue Bridget's boom is on center line. And then she does a nice job, we don't have the advantage of a traveler. So it isn't as if Bridget pulls the main sheet harder, the boom doesn't go here. If Bridget pulls the main sheet harder, the boom comes down. Everyone understand that? And then what happens is all of this, the longer thing, and you can see here, there's a telltale that has flow, and there's a telltale that has flow. Meaning that if that telltale there has flow, and that telltale there has flow, we don't have leech telltales down here, but our boom's on center line, what do we know we have? I told you all the answers. We have flow. We have flow. And if we have flow, unlike the biplane that's gone vertical, what do we know we're doing? No, we know we're generating lift because we have flow, right? The biplane, once it goes vertical and stalls, it has to turn all the way back towards Earth till it generates flow again. So we need to make sure we're disciplined in our sail trim, that we have flow over our wing so that we can then generate power to generate lift. And if we pull our main sheet too hard, straight down like this pencil, and let's exaggerate, our main sheet comes all the way down here on top of our tiller, all we're doing is we're shutting down our wing. And if we shut down our wing, we have to then get our biplane pointed all the way down to Earth and allow gravity to take over.
I've heard from some coaches, and maybe this is more fleet specific, based on sail design, but I've heard from some coaches that sometimes you want, some of them have said, have the top mainsail telltale backing half the time or something like that. But some level of backing is good. So trim until you get just a little bit of backing on the top mainsail telltale.
On a displacement boat. If we are sailing a displacement boat, yes, because what do you have an advantage of a displacement boat?
Inertia.
Inertia. You have displacement. So if we were sailing John's Tartan 10, we could probably sail a slightly firmer leech, because if we start to get slow, we have the momentum of the displacement of the Tartan 10 to continue us. We don't have that here. right? I was with John and Erica the other day, and John, Erica, and I had no problem picking up a Vanguard 15 and putting it on the roof of John's car. Just the three of us, right? And I haven't been working out during COVID at all, right? So, I mean, I know I didn't lift much, right? So, what I'm saying is we don't have a lot of inertia on it. So, we need to depend on our flow, our boat through the water to generate our power.
Which is why your blades and your sails have to work together all the time.
So, one of the things that I was talking about is, I'm sure we've all heard this. Like, let's use a Melgus 24 an example. I'm sure everyone's heard the sales pitch. Wow, a Melgus 24 is great till 12 knots. And then as soon as you get over 12 knots, you're only thinking about depowering. You know, you're doing everything you can on a Melgus 24 to sail it to 12 knots. Once you eclipse 12 knots, you're doing everything you can to depower. Think about that same statement here with the Vanguard 15. We want to do, and maybe some of us, if John and I sail together, I'm going to say I'm heavier than Erica. John and I could say we're going to do everything we could power the Vanguard 15 to 15 knots because John and I are heavier and can generate a stronger riding moment. Maybe John and Erica can do everything they can to power the Vanguard 15 to 12 knots, but because Erica just weighs less than I do, then they have to start to depower. And that's where I want you all to think is, if you generate more power and use that power to increase your boat speed into the vector of the wind coming, then you've increased your overall power. I know I'm repeating myself from earlier, and you will be faster through the water because you have more power. You simply have applied more fuel to the fire. So that was the theme of the day. And if we want to see some of the drone footage, I bet we can see it in the leaders that the leaders were able to hike out sooner than the boats in the back. So that's what you're trying to do, right? We want to get the boats in the back to be able to hike out as soon as the leaders. That would be my general upwind message of the day. And that would cure all that. Yeah, the one thing I have to say, one is a tuning thing. One is a tuning thing that we should make sure we measure the bridles on like John's boat and Mike's good boat. Well, it's John's good boat, sorry, and Mike's boat. And then we need to make sure that everyone ties their main halyard onto the head of the main the same, so that we're getting the heads of the main all the way to the top of the mast. So look at that on Saturday, right? We want everyone's headboard pinned in hard because then the bridle height will work for that geometry.
I think though also like my new sails, I have easier time with a hoist. My old sails that are wicked, you know, fat. They're just obese, you know. And when I really hammer the main halyard on really hard, I get that thing to the top. But I mean, it really pulls the thing tight. So I think it's like background stretches, but I think it also there's some shrinkage on the bolt rope.
The bolt rope causes that. So the bolt rope shrinks, and so if you want to use those sails, you should release the bolt rope at the bottom.
Okay.
And there's some stitches there. Just release those and let it.
One thing I want to expand One thing I want to expand on your comment, Finn. Finn asked a comment that he's heard other people say. Well, what about when I let the telltale stall occasionally? I let it stall occasionally. I let it stall occasionally. You let the telltale stall occasionally. It's the same thing if you're driving a car with a standard transmission. You're in fifth gear. You're cruising down the highway. You roll up onto two 18-wheelers. What do you have to do? You have to drop the car into fourth gear because you've had to brake and you need to induce more power. If you get, all right, and then you got to be in fourth gear, step on the gas again, release the gas, step on the clutch, shift to fifth gear to get going again. If you get to that point where, yeah, Finn, maybe some of us can see that telltale wink at us occasionally, that's fine. But you then realize you have to have the feel on the helm to do that. we're better off driving around the race course in 4th gear, burning the fuel. So we want to keep the telltale streaming, and then as we progress and say, all right, now I feel like I can advance to 5th gear and maybe have it do its little dance and fine. Another interesting way I describe it to people on bigger boats, and this is a great drill. It's tougher to do on the Vanguard 15, but maybe I can illustrate it with my cup, is you go out on a Melgus 24, I've done it sometimes with the kids on the Club 420s because they do have a rounded surface, and you take a cup with water, or you take a pop can, or maybe because we're adults, we take a can of beer, and I'll do it here in my hand, and